Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video, we've got another news and rumor video to discuss. In today's video, we're looking at a couple of signings from our past couple of days, some very interesting news updates, and we've got some trade rumors involving the Pittsburgh Penguins, the Canadiens, the Ducks, and a couple of other teams. We'll get to all the updates from our past couple of days coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. Now before we get started, don't forget to like this video and subscribe below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to do this without all of you guys, so if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below, and don't forget to comment down the comment section below so you can also listen to today's video. And don't forget to stay tuned for more videos coming out in the very near future. So in today's video, as usual, we'll start with a couple of signings that happened from our past couple of days. 4 signings happened from over the past number of days, so we'll touch on all these signings here. So first, back over on the last day of July, we saw the Buffalo Sabres sign RFA goaltender Devin Levi. Levi, who was an RFA in need of a new contract, played last year over in the AHL mostly, got a 2-year contract extension, AAV of $813,000. So after signing of Alex Lyon, there's a very likely chance Levi will once again start the regular season in the AHL, so that's very interesting out there. Last year, played 9 NHL games, putting up a 4.12 GAA, 872 save percentage, and also had a 2.20 GAA and 919 save percentage in 42 AHL games. So it was great in the AHL, still looked a little bit shaky at the NHL level, but he still looks like he's going to project to be a top level goaltender. And even though I do think they'll probably run with UPL and Lyon this upcoming season for the Buffalo Sabres, if Levi has a great season this upcoming season in the AHL, I would not be one bit surprised if Levi was an NHL level goaltender next off season. So we shall wait and see on that, but Levi has signed a 2-year extension and will remain with the Buffalo Sabres for the foreseeable future. Next, going over to the Anaheim Ducks, they have signed 23-year-old winger Tim Wash, who's 23 years old, to an identical 2-year deal with a $813,000. Just like Levi, Wash gets a 2-year deal. Wash last year played over in the NCAA, putting up 16 goals and 38 points in 42 games. He was an undrafted player, so the Ducks signed him to a 1-year deal to bring him over to the Ducks organization, where he would have no points in 2 NHL games. So Wash, I think most likely will start the season at the AHL level, but I would not be one bit surprised with how well he did in the NCAA last year, and if he starts the season well at the AHL level, he was a call-up option for the Ducks. So very interesting note there, but the Ducks have signed Wash to a 2-year extension, and he will remain in the Anaheim Ducks organization. Another 23-year-old player who recently just got signed is in Los Angeles as the RFA Alex Laferreire, right winger, 23 years old, had a fantastic breakout season last year, got a 3-year contract extension, AAV of $4.1 million. So he'll be an RFA at the end of this contract too, which is really great news there for the Kings. Laferreire last year had 19 goals, 42 points in 77 games. Brilliant season in his second NHL season. He's going to be a very solid top-line forward, hard to play against guy going forward. And I think $4.1 million, if he can continue to grow, eventually by the end of this contract, be like a 25 to 30 goal scorer and like a 60 to 70 point player. Like if he grows into that sort of player, this deal is going to look like a steal in a couple of years' time. So very interesting note there. But Laferreire has signed a 3-year deal in the LA Kings organization. So very good stuff there for Los Angeles. And lastly, the last arbitration case avoids arbitration. So we had no arbitration cases actually hit arbitration this year, as Nick Robertson, who was the final player who was scheduled to hit arbitration, 23-year-old winger, he had filed for arbitration. He winds up signing a 1-year contract extension, AAV of $1.825 million. So they had already exchanged numbers. The Leafs wanted something closer to $1 million. Robertson wanted over $2 million, so they sort of agree in the middle here and give him a $1.825 million AAV deal. Robertson last year played in 69 NHL games, putting up 15 goals and 22 points, which wasn't an overly bad season there from Robertson. I definitely think going forward, Robertson is going to be a very fantastic player there for the Toronto Maple Leafs. So very interesting note there. But the Leafs have signed Nick Robertson to a 1-year deal, and even though there's a possibility he could still get traded, he at least avoided arbitration. So very interesting note there. But those are all signings from our past couple of days. As Robertson avoids arbitration, Laferriere gets a multi-year deal, and Wash and Levi get low-end deals to they'll remain with their current club, so very interesting note there. Next, we'll go over to a couple of news updates. So I have a couple of news updates, some very interesting ones. So first, with players signing overseas, Jacob Vrana has signed over in the SHL, Matthias Laferreire has signed over in the KHL, and Jimmy Vesey has signed over in the National League. So Vrana, the past couple seasons, has been bouncing around. Sometimes he was a bottom six forward, sometimes he was more of an AHL guy. Definitely far removed from the time when he was like a 20 to 30 goal scorer with the Washington Capitals. So with all that in mind, he was probably going to be a guy who started at the AHL level this year. So instead of doing that, he signs over in the SHL. Same thing with Vesey. He's actually been a pretty decent bottom six forward over the past couple of years. Wasn't able to find an NHL contract that he liked, so he signs over in the National League. So he's going to take his talents overseas. And then Matthias Laferriere, who's been a long-time AHL level player, is probably going to be an AHL level player if he signed an NHL contract again. Instead, signs in the KHL, and hopefully he'll be able to do a little bit better and make some more money over in the KHL. So very interesting note there. But Vrana in the SHL, Laferriere in the KHL, and Vesey in the National League have all signed overseas, and will take their talents at least for the next year over to Europe. So very interesting note there. Going over to a couple of very interesting injury updates. Zane Parekh, who played in the World Junior Showcase, was actually injured with a lower body injury, but should be ready for training camp. So that's a really good news there for Calgary. It was a little bit of a scare when he got injured because he's projected to be a solid top four defenseman for the Flames this upcoming season. So if they were to lose him to injury, that would have been terrible for the Calgary Flames, but he should be ready to go for training camp, so that's really good news. Miro Heiskanen, it seems like, will be fully healthy for training camp, so we know that Heiskanen suffered a knee injury during the season that kept him out for the remainder of the regular season plus some of the playoffs. And even though he was able to get back into the lineup, he still wasn't 100%. Well, it does seem like he'll be 100% healthy for the start of training camp, which is going to be very good news there for the Stars, as having a healthy Heiskanen could be a difference maker going into the season. And then according to Elliotte Friedman, he says that Matthew Tkachuk, he's hearing, is very likely to miss the start of the regular season. He says there's a very likely chance he misses the first portion of the regular season and maybe comes back closer to the Olympics, so when he's able to go over to the Olympics and play with Team USA. So it seems like after suffering through injuries during the playoffs last year and missing the rest of the regular season due to those injuries, he will be missing time at the start of the season, which will be a really big blow there for the Florida Panthers, but that seemed like they will be able to probably get through it enough that they should be able to still be a playoff team. So interesting note there. But Tkachuk will most likely miss the first few months of the season for the Florida Panthers, while Heiskanen will be ready to go for training camp, and after being injured at the World Junior Showcase, Parekh should also be ready to go for training camp. So very interesting note there. Next, going over to a potential retirement we could have seen last year, but didn't wind up happening, and that was with Preds prospect Spencer Stastney. Stastney was a really solid prospect in the National Predators organization, but after, not this past year, but the year prior, he apparently had considered retirement after not really figuring out what his future was holding in hockey, but he actually decided to remain in hockey. He had a really good season last year, and he still signed a contract. So even though he considered retirement, he's still playing. But it's very interesting out there that Spencer Stastney, who is actually on the younger side of things, I think he's only like 24, 25 years old, was actually considering retirement at one point 2 years ago. So very interesting note there. And lastly, going over to the Washington Capitals, they have hired Derek King as their new AHL head coach. So King has had some experience in the past being a coach at the AHL level. He's going to join the Washington Capitals staff, so that's very good news there for the Caps. I think they lost last year's AHL head coach due to an opportunity that he got somewhere else, so they need a new head coach at the AHL level, and Derek King's going to fill that spot. So very interesting note there. But those are all the news updates from the past couple of days, as King is now the new head coach in Washington. Stastney, not last year but the year prior, did consider retirement before he wound up staying with the Nashville Predators. Heiskanen, Parekh should both be ready for training camp, while Tkachuk will most likely miss the first few months of the season. And Vesey, Vrana, and Laferriere have all signed overseas, so very interesting note there. And lastly, going over to a couple of trade rumors. Now, when it comes to the trade rumors, we've got a couple of things to talk about here. So first, when it comes to Elliotte Friedman, he did a recent 32 Thoughts podcast recently, and he was talking about a lot of very interesting things. One thing he mentioned is, even though we talked about it earlier in this video, Nick Robertson signed an extension in Toronto, and the Leafs don't need to move him, him. Elliotte Friedman would not be surprised one bit if he was still moved. The Leafs apparently currently have 14 players on one-way contracts on their roster, and that's not including younger players like Easton Cowan, who could potentially challenge for a roster spot. So with that in mind, they have way too many forwards. Now there's a possibility they could try and send one or two guys down via waivers closer to training camp. Like, that's a possibility. But we're not a bit surprised if we saw them move 1 to 2 players like a Nick Robertson, David Kampf, or a Calle Yarncroke. Like, those are 3 guys who seem to be heavily mentioned as potential trade targets for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And Elliotte Friedman does mention that the Pittsburgh Penguins and former Maple Leafs GM Kyle Dubas could be a landing spot for Nick Robertson. This is the second straight year that Friedman has mentioned that Dubas could be looking to bring Robertson to Pittsburgh. Robertson was one of Kyle Dubas' draft picks when he was with the Toronto Maple Leafs, so he could be trying to bring him back to Pittsburgh. And Robertson fits the sort of build that Dubas is trying to build the Pittsburgh Penguins around. Young, established forward players. Now, Robertson's not the greatest of forwards, don't get me wrong, but he's a guy who can be a suitable top 9 guy. And I think playing with guys like Crosby, like Malkin, Robertson could be a really solid fit there in the Pittsburgh Penguins organization. So I'm not sure what the Leafs would want for Robertson if they were still trying to move him. Like, they'll have $2 million in cap, which would be a plus. But they could also probably use some draft capital because you don't have a whole bunch of that. Maybe a prospect or two, maybe to try and trade for a cheaper forward. Like, that's another possibility. So we will have to wait and see on that. But Elliotte Friedman does wonder that Pittsburgh could be a landing spot for Nick Robertson if the Leafs could try and continue to look to move him. So we'll have to wait and see on that. And personally, I do think one of Robertson, Kampf, or Yarncroke will get moved, if not before season starts, then some point during the season. So we'll have to wait and see on that. Next, going over to Marco D'Amico. He was talking about the Anaheim Ducks and Mason McTavish. He says that he does really want to see where this McTavish thing goes. He says that he thinks there's a very likely possibility the Ducks do wind up signing McTavish, but he says that if McTavish was available, there will be a ton of teams who have some major interest. And he says at the top of his list that he thinks will have some interest will be Montreal. They have a solid top line center, Nick Suzuki. They have been looking all off season long for a second line center, and McTavish will fit that bill. And I even mentioned that a couple of videos ago where I said the Habs were looking for a second line center, and I personally do wonder about Mason McTavish. So we'll have to wait and see on that. I definitely think the Habs are going to be one of the teams in major trade talks with the Anaheim Ducks should McTavish be available. I'm not sure what the Ducks would want. Like, their team really wants to go forward, take a few steps forward. So would the Habs be willing to move like an Alex Newhook in the second round pick or something like that for McTavish? I'm not exactly sure. Like, I think the Ducks would probably want a roster player from the Habs. The Habs do have a ton of prospects and picks I think could also really intrigue the Anaheim Ducks. So we'll have to wait and see on this, but McTavish is still one of the few RFAs who has not been signed to an NHL level contract. And with that in mind, it seems there's a possibility brewing out there that McTavish could get dealt. I personally do think that's a possibility. And Montreal, being a team who needs a second line center, seems to be on the forefront of potentially trying to acquire Mason McTavish. So we'll have to wait and see on that. Next, going over to Arif Deen. He was talking about the Colorado Avalanche. Now, apparently he says that the Avalanche could still look to try and move Sam Girard, and that could still be in their plans. Now, the Avs are cap compliant. They don't have to make any more movement going into the season. They have a solid defensive core in Girard, Taves, Manson, Burns, Makar, Malinsky. Like, their defensive core is really good. But their forward group's a little bit lackluster, especially in their bottom 6. So they really don't have enough cap space right now to make some sort of major addition to their bottom 6. So with that in mind, there is a possibility out there that they could still try and move Girard to free up enough cap space to go after someone who can help in their top 9. Now, I don't think it's a guarantee Girard will get moved, especially before the regular season starts, because they have such a really good defensive core. But according to Deen, he does wonder if Girard could still be a guy who the Avalanche look at moving, just given how good of a player he is. He's a puck-moving defenseman, really good guy. His offensive production has gone down over the past couple of years, but he's still a really good player. I think he's signed for either 1 or 2 more seasons at $5 million, so there's a little more of a high-price defenseman, but he can play second per minutes and can put you up some points, especially on the right team. So we'll have to wait and see on that. I don't think it's a guarantee after the Coyle moves and freeing up cap space that Girard will get moved by the Avalanche. Personally, I don't think it's a guarantee to happen. But if the Avalanche really wants some more bottom 6 help, I could definitely see him try and move Girard to get that. So we're going to have to wait and see on that, but keep your eye on the Avalanche, as apparently there could still be a shot for the Avalanche to deal with Sam Girard at some point, potentially before training camp. And lastly, going over to Frank Seravalli. He mentioned that, talking about Erik Karlsson, that besides the Canes, you really have to squint to try and find some sort of other place where Erik Karlsson could be traded to. So like we talked about in a recent video, Florida, Ottawa, Dallas, a couple of these other teams really don't have either the cap space or the roster space to fit in Erik Karlsson on their current team. Like, they don't have that sort of space at this current point in time on those teams' rosters. So with that in mind, the options for Karlsson to be dealt are dwindling. There's a very likely chance that I personally think at this point in time that the Penguins go into the season with Erik Karlsson still in their lineup, and they'll potentially deal him either at this upcoming trade deadline or potentially next offseason. But I just don't think that at this point in time there's enough teams out there that the Penguins will make sense to move Erik Karlsson. But apparently, according to Seravalli, one of the teams who does really make some sense is Carolina. The Canes could use another top 4 offensive-minded defenseman. They acquired Keandre Miller this offseason, but they lost Burns and Orlov. As much as Nikishin's probably going to be an NHL level player next year, they could definitely use someone more on that defensive core. So adding Erik Karlsson guy would be smart. They have the assets to try and trade for him. They have some pretty good picks. They have some decent prospects, and they have some young NHL players they think could really intrigue the Pittsburgh Penguins. So we're going to have to wait and see on this. Once again, no guarantees, in my opinion at least, that Karlsson gets moved at any point before season starts. And I think at this point in time, it's more likely that one of Rush or Raquel gets moved before the start of the season than Karlsson, and I do think it's more likely Karlsson will have to wait to get dealt until maybe closer to the trade deadline or next offseason. But Seravalli does say that one team that might still have some very much interest in trying to acquire Karlsson and could still have the space, cap-wise and roster-wise, to fit him is the Carolina Hurricanes. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. But that's all we're talking for today. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. What do you think about all of this? Does Nick Robertson go to Pittsburgh? Does McTavish go to Montreal? Do the Avalanche deal Girard? And could Carolina be landing spot for Erik Karlsson? Definitely your thoughts on all of that, plus all of the news updates and signing updates from our past couple of days. That's all I'm going to talk for today. Or until I like this video, if you'd like to subscribe below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to do this without you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. Don't forget to comment. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers. Don't forget to stay tuned for more videos coming out in the very near future. Also a blog, talking about news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that. So check that out. I'll link that in the description below. Can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.